Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of DoubleDM podcast. I am your host, Emil. I am joined by my co-host, Niels, today. This episode 99, the last episode before the 100th episode, is gonna feature a guest, Alec Azzam, a pro GM, content creator, in general, just awesome human being, who we will be talking to about pro GMing and content creation and how that works, how it is to run 15 games a week. How does prepping work? How does starting as a pro GM work? And stuff like that. But first, we are here to recap our weeks and what happened for us. Niels, what did happen? How are you doing today?
I'm doing way better today than yesterday because the last 2 days I had a fever that didn't want to go away. But today it's gone, finally. The last 2 days I just laid in bed all day and did nothing really. So my back hurts like hell, but at least I don't have a fever anymore. So that's good.
Yay.
And that's the reason why our holiday one-shot fell through, because
Unlucky.
I got sick. So just laying around, watching movies, playing some video games, sulking over that I didn't get to play D&D this week.
You're not alone that you didn't get to play this week. I mean, I think people can hear it. I don't know how good my voice actually sounds because I have COVID. Yeah, I've been tested positive. On Thursday, I got the lab test results, but I am positive since Tuesday, and the symptoms started on Sunday, so I am not infectious anymore.
Very good.
My infection rating, whatever you want to call it, is over the mark for infectious, so I am good.
Very nice.
But yeah, obviously isolating over at least the 5-day mark since getting positive on Tuesday, but 10 would probably be the time I do. Or depending on how good I'm feeling. Right, in Germany, if you get COVID, you have to at least do 5 days. That's the minimum you have to do. 10 is the one you actually have to do, but you're allowed to do less than 10 if you're asymptomatic for at least 48 hours and have a negative test result.
Yeah.
Then you're allowed to end your isolation before 10 days are over, but that rule only goes after 5 days. Okay, let's say it this way. I had COVID twice now. Once in December 2020 and now in December 2022. I had COVID and COVID too. And the thing is, that first time I had nothing, no symptoms at all. COVID is a motherfucker now. The thing is, right, the first time I had COVID, I knew I had it because I felt that I'm sick, but I didn't have to cough. I had no problem with my throat. I had no runny nose, nothing. When looking at a list of symptoms, this time I dodged, I think, 1 of the 10 symptoms that are common.
Oh, damn.
And to say this, I'm a pretty resilient person. COVID is no fucking joke. It's fucking disgusting, this thing is. And really, do your best to avoid this shit. Wear a mask at all times, go out the least amount possible, and err on the side of safety.
Yeah.
That's all I will say about this.
But regarding the COVID is no fucking joke, the time I got it, this was in March this year. I didn't really have any symptoms except a runny nose as well. But what came to mind after the fact, that after I was tested negative for 3 straight days and with being asymptomatic more than 48 hours, I just realized that my ability to think critically, you could say, was a bit hindered. Some tasks that I usually could do in like 5 to 10 minutes took 20 to 50 to 30 minutes.
Oh yeah.
But during the time, I didn't realize it. But just thinking back, it's just
something that you're not thinking about, because obviously your brain is not thinking straight. My brain is so fucking slow, actually.
Yeah.
I think the way I would describe it is when I had this shit now, and it's like a barrier has been broken down in my brain that basically kept me from doing dumb shit I don't have to do, because I went to the kitchen, got myself some tea, and what did I decide to do while I was waiting for my tea to steep?
I don't know. Enlighten me.
I decided to dance.
Oh yeah.
Why the fuck did I do that? I literally cannot tell you the thinking process, Ben, because I think there was no thinking process.
Yeah, counter question, why the fuck not?
I wanted to go to the toilet.
Okay, good point.
I had to pee.
Yeah.
And I let my intrusive thoughts win, and I think they are just stronger since I am weakened.
Yeah, makes sense. But other than just sick news, me and my friends, or a couple of my friends, got back into Warhammer 40k a bit over the last couple of weeks, painted some miniatures again, and are basically some miniatures away, building and or painting for some to play again. And I'm excited because I have played this game in, I think, 3 or 4 years. And I just discovered all my old models in my cellar. And yeah, now it's just all over my living room table because why not? Right? Just painting station and models and unfinished painted, not finished painted models. Everything's just standing around here. But yeah.
Is there a reason why you got back into it now?
Not really, other than me and my friends talking about 40k constantly because we really enjoy the lore. Hearing or reading books about the lore itself. The Horus Heresy, for example, is amazing, an amazing series. But yeah, then we just thought, hey, we all have some models, right? Why not play again? And now it's there. Then I looked at some models on the website that I might get in the future, and I discovered some models that would be an amazing model for a D&D villain or a TTRPG villain in general. Just the demons, the big ones are amazing. But yeah, that has been my last couple of weeks.
Yeah, my week has been nothing but COVID, so no TTRPG sessions, and I think it was my last session of the year is now quite some time out. It's last week, Thursday, was probably my last session of the year. So, I'd have nothing else to talk about. The episode is already a little bit longer than usual, so why not go ahead and after our mid-roll, meet Alec Azzam, the pro dungeon master that runs 12 games a week, and let's talk to him about how he does that.
Hey, dear listener, we arrived at this episode's mid-roll. I don't want to keep you too long in this break from the usual program, but podcasting overlords demand that I ask you to rate and review our show to help us expand our reach and get new listeners. But also with more reviews and ratings comes the benefit of us getting a better feel for what you like and dislike about the show, allowing us to improve our show to the next level just for you guys. And hey, if you really like the show, then recommend us to your friends so we can share our content with them and help them with whatever dungeon master dilemma or player problems they are having right now. I know you hear this all of the time, but really doing so helps shows like ours and any other podcaster, especially indie podcasters, out immensely in creating the best content possible. So again, rate, review, tell a friend or whatever works for you. If you are feeling super generous today, you can check out our Ko-Fi and donate a few bucks towards upgrading the show with new microphones, editing software, and studio surroundings. No pressure at all though, this is just if you feel like you want to help out. Lastly, I also want to tell you guys about our social media channels and that you can follow us on especially Twitter or Instagram to stay up to date with the show and get a whole slew of other content like memes, tips, and general shitposts about TTRPGs and the TTRPG industry or community. Thank you guys so much for your constant support of our show, and we hope we can continue creating amazing content for you guys well into the future. Oh, one last thing. If you have a TTRPG product you want to advertise on our show, contact us about affordable ad space on DoubleDM episodes, and we also have promo swap spaces available for other podcasters and shows. And with that, right back to the show.
And with that, we are back from our break. With us now is our guest, Alec. But don't let me hold you up to introducing yourself. Please, go ahead. Who are you? How did you get into TTRPGs? All that good stuff.
Well, I'm Alec Azzam. I'm a pro DM. I'm a purveyor of all things homebrew. This is actually super exciting. I actually professionally run D&D and a few other systems as well for people. And I create a ton of homebrew stuff that I can then sell online. I stream occasionally, but I got into TTRPGs because firstly, I had a very imaginative person, had nothing better to do with my time, why not try it? But I remember specifically seeing the 3rd edition books and I was like, oh, this is like a cool game. And my father was like, yeah, I'm not going to play that with you because I know if you try D&D, you'll become obsessed. It'll be your whole life. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I tried it again as an adult. And I was like, wow, he was right. But it has become my whole life. It's what I do 90 hours a week. So
I'm gonna just go right for it. 90 hours a week of TTRPG, of D&D. How did that come to be?
Well, I had a weekly game that I was doing a few years ago, and it was a super fun campaign. We went from level 1 all the way to level 20. Everyone really loved, all the great characters they had built, and it was just like really, really fun. And I had, when I would have a day off and my wife was at work or doing something, or it's like, oh, let me go to a comic book shop or a game shop. They would have like, oh, you can sit down at a table and people can, buy you lunch or like give you, $5-10 and run a game for them. I was like, oh, why not? And I tried it a couple times and it was fun. But then, of course, like so many other people, when the lockdown started in 2020, it's like I had been laid off from my job. I had nothing to do. I was like, oh man, I am just killing myself trying to figure out how to make some money. And I had my brother-in-law was like, well, I know you're really stressed out every day. He's like, would you run a weekly game, not just for your friends, but also for my friends? And I was like, all right, whatever. And I started just doing then 2 games a week. Again, still not paid yet really for this, but at the end of that year, campaign was already more than half done. We were like level 10 already, and I was like, I gotta make some money. And they all basically said, we love playing with you and you are really good at this. You've like said you've made some money before running games, we'll pay you. And I was like, huh, what? And I'm like crying, and it was just this big emotional moment for me to realize that that was something I could do, firstly so I could pay my bills, but also I was like, oh, I didn't realize you could actually like do that as a job. And I like did some research. I tried to find a good price point and started advertising myself online. I went from 2 games a week to 5 to 10, and I've had for the past 2 years a consistent like minimum of 12, usually closer to 15 games a week. So it's just spiraled into that. I've had a couple times where I was like as high as 17 or 18 games, but generally 12 to 15 games a week for 2 years now.
That's a lot.
This is wow. Yeah.
I definitely, and I hear even from other DMs and especially even other pro DMs, they're like, no one can tabletop at this speed. And I'm like, I don't know. I have nothing else I'm doing. And I'm like, why not? And I add on to that like all the homebrew I write, when I stream, and like the other prep and stuff I do, like writing out other things. I don't know. I enjoy doing it, and it's better than me literally sitting at home staring at the wall. So why not make money doing something I love?
Yeah, for real.
Regarding the prep that you just mentioned, I have a question for that. Did the prepping ways change since you started doing more sessions every week? And if so, in what ways compared to your own home games before?
It changes vastly. Like when I was just running home games for my friends, session prep could take all sorts of different forms, from like, oh, let me spend hours like carefully moving, like little terrain I have at home on the table and doing this, or let me think of these like super delicate, intense encounters and do this and that. Or it could even be like, 5 minutes before my friends get here, I'm like, oh, what are we doing today? You fight some goblins, like it's just doesn't, because you're with your friends and you're just having fun. This is, now that it's my job, I have to take it much more seriously. So I dedicate like certain blocks of time. And it also changes in the sense that I offer like actual published modules, and I do homebrew games. If it's a published module, I've run Waterdeep Dragon Heist 8 times. I've done Curse of Strahd 4 times. I've done Rime of the Frost Maiden 4 times. Like, I can run those games in my sleep. I don't have to prep. 10 minutes before the game starts, I look over my notes, see where the party's at. Which I should say, my notes, I mean like the virtual tabletop I'm using, I like check to see where they're at. I don't write anything down, which is another thing that stuns people. I don't write any notes for myself. I just keep it all up in my noodle. Once I like kind of have that like a module, it's almost no prep, and I just go in and jump in and have a good time. If it's a homebrew game, that could be minimum an hour each game to make sure that the party's ready, but I have to be consistent with my prep. I have to do it because these aren't just my friends. Like, all my players, basically we become very friendly, but these are paying customers here to have a good time. So I have to take it very, very seriously. And that's something that I can't just joke around and be like, oh, today you're just doing something stupid and random because, whatever. It's like, even on the days where it's a little lower stakes, the party's just going through something kind of, random things and like just kind of like traveling or something, it still has to be taken very seriously to make sure that they're having a good time from the second they start playing till we're wrapping up the call.
And one question. Do you still have home games, private games with friends and family?
I occasionally do. I don't have that weekly game anymore.
Okay.
Now that is more circumstance of like the lockdown made it difficult to play in person. We actually had gotten to like the final boss, if you will. Like everyone was level 19. They were about to go into level 20. They knew they had to go and fight this big archdevil that was the big bad of the campaign, and then that was March of 2020. So we spent like a couple of months where we're like, well, we don't want to just do the final battle like online. That seems weird. So we did some online one-shots where I got to try some different stuff, and then like we met in person for that final game. We did another at-home game once we were all more comfortable being around each other. But then it's like two of the players had a kid. One of the other players was like, oh, my schedule is a little different now because I have a new job. So that became more a victim of like, as every game eventually does, scheduling becomes an issue. But now I'm like, yeah, I run a lot of games. It's hard for me to clear out an extra block of time for my friends to come over.
Yeah.
But yes, we do still like, if it's someone's birthday, they inevitably are like, oh, can you run a game for me? I'm like, sure. Or I've had a few friends that we've transitioned exclusively online, but we still play every week.
Okay, because then I have a question, right? You said that your Pro GM games are obviously more seriously. You have paying customers, you want them to have a good time because that's what they pay for. In what ways in the game, for example, or in your running, really does that manifest, right? You said in the prepping, the way you try to get these customers or the people their enjoyment, basically. How does that all manifest? In especially, what is the difference between home games and Pro GM games?
I find for my home games, it's like I said, it's a more laid back atmosphere. I can kind of go and, I've literally like called a mulligan while we were playing where we're like going and I was like, you know what, I don't like this encounter. Let's just wrap it up or like skip to this to do or I was like, my friends would come over and I'm like, hey, can we just hang out today? I don't feel like doing nothing. As a pro GM, it's a lot harder to like call out because people set aside blocks of time to do this. And it doesn't occasionally happen, but I have to be much more serious about the scheduling part of it. And there's also the aspect in the game itself of if I just run like for instance, a module straight out of the book, that can get a little boring for some players, especially really experienced players. So they want more attention to detail. Like if they put a backstory for the character, they want that really worked into the story. If they come here and they're like, well, I want big, interesting set piece encounters. I want like custom tokens for the virtual tabletop. I have where I include my homebrew. I include animated tokens, like I have background music while we're playing, like all the little bells and whistles that aren't necessary to make a game fun, but they do add more to the game itself. And I think that if I'm paying for something, I want my money's worth. I really want to feel like, oh man, this is worth more than me just sitting with my friends and just playing a casual game. Like I equate it to, if I'm gonna go and just hang out with my friends, that's one thing, but if I'm gonna go like see a big budget movie and I'm paying for a movie ticket, I want to see something that's worth my time.
I have another quick question. Did the view on the hobby itself change since you started pro GMing? Not just on the preparation phase or how you run it, but on the hobby itself?
Definitely. Because when I would just like play a home game, I'm like, you see now I have to track all the news of what Wizards of the Coast is doing, and not just like D&D. Like I said, I run, Cyberpunk, Lancer, Blades in the Dark, Thirsty Sword Lesbians. Like I run all these different games. I recently just have friends who want to do like the Mork board games. I have to track all this like TTRPG news because it's part of my job now. It's like if I see that, for the 1D&D stuff, I have to look at every playtest the day it comes out, every book that comes out. Like if my friends are like, oh, I heard that this Radiant Citadel book is coming out. I'm like, that's kind of cool. But it's like, as a pro DM, I'm like, I have to pick up that book. I have to be able to run it essentially the day it comes out. I know when Wild Beyond the Witchlight came out, it came out on a Tuesday. I started running the first session of one that week's Friday. So like I had just, a couple of days to run it. So I had to read the whole thing. And then there's also, there is whether people want to admit it or not, there are like political aspects to D&D. You know, we hear all about people being like, oh, you know, the social justice and this. I have to follow every bit of news that comes out around TTRPGs and be wary of that and how players might react to it, because that's inevitably going to be part of it. The biggest change that I made, though, is I have to pick up every book and I have to be ready to run any system and run any kind of game at any time. So I can't just be like, my friends are like, oh, I want to do, you know, this one. I'm like, nah, I haven't picked it up yet, so we're not going to do that.
Yeah, I can see that you really have to be aware of everything happening, because every news is gonna change the landscape. You're required to know when this is your job, you obviously need to know what is happening to adjust.
Yeah, I know when Spelljammer came out, almost all of my players were like, so when are we going to get a Spelljammer? Okay. Like, you know, it's hard to call that a setting. It's really more a style of campaign. But like, I love Spelljammer stuff from earlier editions, so I was like really excited for the book. But it's like, man, give me a week to read it. God, but I have to be ready. So like I said, I have to pre-order every book. The second it's available, I have to like read through the whole thing as fast as possible and be ready to go, because I'll have players asking me questions the day a book comes out or the day after a book comes out.
Maybe a little bit of an ignorant question, maybe naive. That sounds very stressful. Is that the case?
Yes and no. I mean, it does become a habit. Like I said, I have other even pro DM friends. I have people who are creators in the space. I have people who work, you know, for me, crazy schedules with like really intense, stressful jobs, who like look at me and they're like, how do you handle this? I'm like, I don't know. I have severe anxiety and depression. I've been handling stress my whole life, you know, but it's just, there are bits that are stressful, but at the same time, you know, I went to a nice restaurant with my wife to celebrate when my first like book of 100 homebrew things came out a few months ago. And we're in this like, you know, I'm wearing a suit and they have like someone playing harp, because it was like a very nice restaurant. And I was like, these people don't know that we're here because I talk about dragons all day. You know, it's really like, it's a silly, fun job. So even when there are days I'm like, oh, I'm doing so many things, I'm so exhausted. Like, I'm like, okay, so you go into the room and there's 4 goblins. Like, it's really, once I get into the actual like running the game, that's the best part. Like the planning and the prepping and the scheduling and the talking to players and then posting online, and because I have to have a big social media presence, that gets stressful, that gets annoying. But there are some aspects of that I've been able to, I can schedule these tweets, or I can do this, or I can figure out when I have a moment of my life to just watch a movie while I'm writing a bunch of stuff. There's ways for me to relax with that, but the actual running the games, it hasn't become annoying yet. There's a few times, you know, someone is like, oh, can we do this module? And I'm like, I'm not as big a fan of that module, but I'll run it. And I just can't let myself just go on autopilot. I'm here to provide a good time. But the most stressful times I've had running the game usually have very little to do with the game itself.
Yeah, I can only imagine. For me, when I schedule my home games, the scheduling part is a nightmare sometimes.
Yeah,
I can't really begin to understand how much of a pain in the ass it can be when you have to schedule 15 games a week.
It is funny because scheduling is the hardest part. There's no dispute in that whatsoever. But it's kind of easier for me because I will go and advertise like, okay, Fridays 10 a.m. This is the time slot. Who wants to play? And then I find players who are like, I can do that every week. And so it's, once you get to a certain point, you can kind of just have an open time slot and let people do the work for you. When I was first starting out, I had to kind of take what I could get. So I'd say like, who wants to play on Friday afternoons? And just hope that people would want to do it. Whereas now I can be like, okay, I have this time slot open, and usually I'll have people message me like, oh my God, I want to play. Like, I'll play whatever. And I'm like, okay. And we find something that works. Since they're paying, people are a lot better about showing up every week and making sure that because they're essentially, you know, they're paying to be there. It's not perfect. You know, there are weeks and there are times where scheduling becomes hard because, you know, we have a smaller game. Like this game has only 3 or 4 people. So if like one person's gone, it makes a big difference. And people might be like, oh, can we do a one shot this week instead? Or can we do this or that? And I'm like, yeah, and we'll figure something out. Or if someone has an emergency or someone's sick. But it's usually pretty good. Once people have found the time slot that works for them, them, then they commit to it because they're paying to commit to it.
I want to talk about, let's call them mechanisms of being a pro GM. How does this paying work? How do you find players? What places do I have to visit for that?
So I can say, and I know other gyms have had luck with different things. For me, I went on Roll20 because that was the tabletop I use, and they have like the forums, and you can post your games and say, okay, it'll cost this much. This is the time I want to do it, and people can message you and like apply to play. I like that. The onus is on me to figure it out and get it all set up, and it's not too hard. There's plenty of people on Roll20, so like I can find something usually pretty fast. But I know there's things like Start Playing, and there's other services where people can advertise themselves. I warn people out there, like if you try to advertise yourself on like Instagram or Twitter or something like that, you're gonna have a bad time. People are going on social media to just have fun and do whatever. If I want to find a game, I know there's a bunch of services out there I can look for a game. If I'm in a Discord server that has postings, great. If I'm on Roll20, if I go on to Start Playing to look, great. If I just see you posting on Twitter every 8 hours, be like, I have games, I'm like, ugh, and I just don't want to follow you. So I warn like people looking to get into the game, like, don't do that. There's actual places that have built-in services for you to post your listings. As far as the actual like payment, I have people who pay me per session. I have people who pay me per month. The best luck I've had is honestly like Patreon. People pay me monthly. You're essentially paying for 4 sessions in a month. I know I personally do a discount if you're doing like multiple games a week, so pay a little less essentially per session, but you get to have 2 sessions each week. I have several players who are in 2 a week. I have several who are in 3 a week. I actually have 2 players who are in 4 games a week. So it is a bit of just finding what's the best payment method for everyone. Money is always going to make it a little more difficult, but it's once you get into a pretty serious like kind of campaign and you have like players you can trust and work with, it all tends to work out.
Okay, so I want to go back to this, that people are surprised that you can run so many games a week, that you can fill your life with so much D&D and TTRPG, because, right, I am also surprised. Because I run maybe, on a good week, 3 to 4 sessions a week, and play in like 2, but that's the maximum I can take. But what people sometimes probably forget in that instance is that they also have a job that they attend to that takes up 8 hours a day, that they have other obligations that they do, and those obviously fall away. And if you have 8 hours a day extra to play, you can see how that becomes how you are able to run so many games, or how you are able to dedicate so much time to this, because it is a job. It is how many hours, however, a day that you invest into this so you can live. Like, obviously.
Yeah. Once I made the realization, like, okay, this is my full-time job, that makes it very different. If I go in and I'm like, oh, I just got off an 8-hour shift, now I got to go run a game. I'm like, oh man, it's like, no, I wake up, I'm like, okay, let me roll out of bed and go play some D&D. That makes a lot of the stress of running the game go away. I know when I was just running my weekly games just for fun with friends, like I'd have some weeks where, like I said, I would have a particularly rough day at work, and I would get home and be like, I don't want to talk about dragons right now. Can we all just hang out? And or even I'd be like, I don't feel like it today. But now I'm like, no, this is all I do. So it's a lot easier than I think some people. I will say, I tell people out there, don't be a crazy person like me. Like, don't go and be like, hooray, I'm going to run 15 games a week. I know that my brain works in a certain way that allows me to run that many games. But I always say your limit is really what you will allow yourself to take. If you run 4 games a week and you're like, I can't handle anymore, then okay, great. But if you are even crazier than me and you're like, oh no, I do 20 games a week, great, live your best life. But I've found that the 12 to 15 range is really where I prefer to be, because that averages like 2 to 3 games a day. That still leaves me some time. I still have like a couple of days off a week. I really have like one solid day off, and I have another day that like if I want to run a game I can, or I might just be like, no, this is like a day I'm just gonna stream or just do one shots and stuff like that.
Interesting. And especially, right, it's not like you just jumped from 1 game a week to 15 games a week. You said that you eased into it. You came gradually increased that range, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes when I don't know, see people reacting, for example, when I have my private TTRPG groups, one that I play in, those people are not that connected to the wider TTRPG world as, for example, I am with Twitter and me having to interact with 100 people a day, or like 10 people, have conversations with them every day like we are having right now. They didn't know that Pro GMing necessarily was that much big of a thing. When I told them, I know people that run 15 games a week because that's their job, they were like, how? Everyone has that first reaction because, right, they only run 2 games a week because after that it's over for them. They're stressed out. But you also didn't make the jump from 1 to 15 games because that's what they experience in their head. That's what they think this is gonna look like. They think, what if I now next week start running 15 games a week? Yeah, that's not gonna work. Probably. But if you start with 1 a week and the next month you go to 2 or 3 and then go to 5, 7, 8, and then you adjust your ways to accommodate that, and then it works. That way you can also find your limit, right? You can also see, I can only run 6 games a week. Yeah. Okay, cool. But I know I can. So that's what I'm aiming at now. And maybe if I'm very comfortable with that, I can go to 7 or try 8 again. But you're not going to jump from 1 to 15 games. That's just crazy.
Like, I have things that make that number of games easier. Like I said, I mean, right now, I will say of those, I'm currently at 15 games. And I have time slots open for people if they want to be in more stuff. But the thing is, most of mine right now are either a module, or we finished a module and we're continuing with the same players, and I'm like homebrewing up some stuff. So yeah, I like to get players from level 1 to level 20. That's my favorite thing in the world. And I've done it many, many times. But it does take work. And so I tell people, I'm like, if you want to get into Pro GMing, you better learn to love the modules, because that's really where you're going to lay. If I started out, okay, let me run a bunch of games a week, and I was like, all right, now I have to run 3 or 4 or 5 homebrew games out of nothing, I would be lost. I wouldn't be able to do it. But if I'm like, hey, I'm doing Dragon Heist on Tuesdays, I'm doing Curse of Strahd on Wednesdays, I'm doing Rime of the Frost Maiden on Fridays, that's much easier to manage. And also, all of my games are online, so I can roll out of bed, like sit down in my chair, start, running the game, as opposed to like, oh, I had to go and set up little models or like some Chessex map to like put stuff. I don't have to do none of that. Here's the maps, here's your tokens, let's do this. And that saves me a lot of time. I have like the actual maps that come with the modules, and if I'm doing homebrew stuff or if I'm creating extra encounters, because I always add to every module, I have a folder of 1,200 maps that I can like use. And but again, that has taken 2 years for me to build up from that. I started where I'm like, okay, this is kind of the blank Roll20 screen, and then I would like draw with a little thing until I started knowing what I was doing. And I've gone more and more professional in my setup as often as I can. Like, I started with the terrible microphone that came with my laptop to now I have an expensive mic that I shelled a bunch of money out for. Like, I went from like, I only run these like 4 modules that I've done in the past to like I said, I have to pick up a module the day it comes out so I can be ready to run it instantly. I have animated tokens for certain spell effects. I have like I said, background music. I have I will make custom encounters and monsters and homebrew all sorts of stuff. My players want to play in the game, like any of the homebrew that I've put out is instantly available for them to use in the game. I don't say like, oh no, you have to buy one of my books. It's like, no, if you're in my game, you get to use it. So there's the benefits that you build up over time, so it becomes easier and easier to run this many games. I went, like I said, an extra game a week, and then like I was like, oh, I can do, let me try on Tuesdays, I'll do like 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock, and then I was like, oh, that doesn't really work, so I started shifting some stuff around, and then I started picking up more and more. I went from, like I said, the home games I was doing to, I would say, probably about 10 games a week over the course of like 3 months maybe 3 to 4 months. And now, like I said, I've just been at that 12 to 15 range for 2 years, solid.
All right. And I think you mentioned going from level 1 to level 20 is one of your favorite things to do in a campaign. You said you have done it a lot of times. Especially for me, if I finish a campaign, it is a kind of magical moment to finish one. Is it still the same for you with running campaigns over and over again, you could say, and having that moment but with different people every time? Is it still as magical as it once used to be, or
it gets emotional every time, because the players, I want them to succeed. I'm so not an adversarial DM, and I also, if I'm a mean adversarial DM, players are like, why am I paying for this? So like I want everyone to have, so I get invested in the players, and when they get to level 20 and they beat the big giant bad guy at the end, I get excited for them, and it's emotional. Like I tell my wife this, and I tell some of my players this. I'm like, I think every time the party has gotten to level 20, I've cried at the final session. It's like I said, it's happened many times that I've gotten a party, but even then, like I have plenty of modules we'll finish and we go level 1 to 12 or 3 to 15, and they're like, we've kind of done everything in this book, or even like homebrew stuff. They're like, we got to a certain point where we feel like the story is pretty much wrapped up, and I ask the party questions like as we go. I ask the players how we're feeling, but if we get to a point where the campaign's done, every time I get emotional, and it's that thing that several DMs will talk about where it's like when you finish a session, you're like emotionally wiped a little bit, and there is an aspect of that for me. I still have, after each session, I take a few minutes to myself to be like, okay, and I just kind of like think about the game, and then for me, I have to like run and grab something to eat and like panic and be like, I have to and then like go to my next game within an hour or two, because I'm running 2 or 3 games in a day. But when they get to level 20 and they finish, I get emotional every time. I just can't help myself. I think if I got to a point where I was like, okay, you defeated a Sararak, woo, like I would stop running games, because the joy and excitement and thrill of TTRPGs is not lost on me. When I do ever feel like, I'm not loving this, then I make a change in that campaign so that I can love it as much as the players do.
I feel that, because, right, one thing I've talked about for quite some time on this podcast everywhere is passion is so important in TTRPGs. If you don't have passion for what you're doing, if you don't have passion for your campaign, your character, everyone's gonna notice. It is felt in everything that happens in the session that you say, that you do. And the same obviously also translates to pro GMing. There's no real difference. Just because you're getting paid, there's still obviously passion involved, and there needs to be passion involved, because everyone feels that passion. And if they don't feel it, the experience is maybe not going to be worth it for them. And that's why I totally can see that you make sure that you also bring passion to the table, because if not, why do it? From the player's perspective, and also your perspective, right? It goes both ways. Why do it if it's not fun for us?
And I also I put my own personal stakes into the game. TTRPGs are the best, safest, incredible space to explore your own your own self while you're playing with your friends. Like, I've learned more about myself in my years of pro GMing than I did with years of speaking to therapists. It's wild how much you can learn about yourself, and when you make it personal and make it something that everyone can be emotionally invested, it makes it so much better. I also I'll do little stuff where I include the character Alec Azzam. This might shock you out there, listeners, but my real name is not actually Alec Azzam. It's no, I'm just some guy named Brian. I'm just here living my best life. But I'll include the character so that the players then like them and will have that. I don't drop them in every game. I don't want people to think I'm some weird narcissist, but I am a little bit, but for I'll have oh, you meet this orc wizard, and he has the big conical hat with the stars and moons on it, and they get excited. That's fun. So when he can help them on some quests and then they move on, I feel like I have gone to their characters and handed them something, and it's let them explore the worlds more easily, and it makes a big emotional impact for me, because I'm playing too. I might be being paid to run the games. I'm here to also have a good time.
Yeah.
So I need to have fun too.
Yeah, I just feel like what I've seen from online discourse, also gonna be very honest, from when I first heard about Pro GMing, which was, I think, 2019, I also was a little bit skeptical of it, right? It's a very new concept. It was a very new concept for me, but obviously it's a job. When you deliver a good service, you're supposed to get paid fairly for it. And if people are willing to pay for it, that's a job. That's all you need to make it a job. You make it a profession. People that are good enough, like you, for example, have deserve that money that they make with it. But obviously, I was a little bit skeptical. And I think a lot of people are a little bit skeptical, at least when they hear about it for the first time, because it is a little bit of a wild concept. I will not lie, but it's still an amazing concept.
It is. And I will say, like, I've gotten hate over it. Like this is wild to me. I've gotten no less than 5 separate death threats, and it's like really, because I talk about dragons and shit all day. Like, is that really that bad? But I'll have people send me like hate, and it's extremely rare. Like I said, that's over the past 2 years. But the thing is, it's like if I want a piece of art in my home and I go to an artist and say, "Can you make this for me?" I pay them to do it. If I like some music, then I pay for it so I can listen to it whenever I want. Like if anytime someone creates something for you, if you go buy a book, it's like you got to pay for it. This is just the people who worked on it worked hard. They deserve to be paid. And if I want a good, consistent, well-run D&D game with someone who can adjudicate the rules well, someone who knows the system forward and backward, someone who is going to be there every week to make sure that, not just you're getting through the module, but you get, like I said, all these like little bonuses. And the thing is, you don't need any of that to have a fun time. Like, I don't think that, and this is my business, but it's like, I don't think that necessarily you need a big virtual tabletop with crazy tokens. You need imagination and people willing to play. And that's really kind of it. But the thing is, there's a huge difference in a pro DM who knows what they're doing and can create this wild, incredible experience for you, and your friend who, like, I know the rules sorta. Let's figure it out. Like, I see horror stories out there, and I have players who come to me like, "Oh yeah, my DM did this horrible thing, and they did this, and they made these wild rulings that make no sense." And I'm like, why would you play in a game like that? Like, that's not fun. There's times where it's like you play with your friends because they're your friends and you want to have fun with your friends. That doesn't mean they know how to run a game in a way that's fun and will be a successful campaign.
Yeah.
I'm not going to show up every week if I'm like, man, I got to sit down for 3-4 hours and they're going to like say a bunch of stupid nonsense and, like make dumb rulings. Then it becomes a matter of like, well, sorry, fellas, I'm busy this week because I'm doing. Then it's like the game starts to fall apart. Whereas if you're like, I know that once a week I can sit down and be told an awesome story and participate in that story and do this and do that. Oh man, what a good fun time. Throw a couple of bucks at somebody so I know I'm going to have a good time for 3 hours a week. Hell yeah, why not?
Yeah.
This is a way for you to make a living of something that once started as a hobby. And I feel like nearly every, especially creative professions, started out that way. So I don't get why people are offended by people being pro GMs. I mean, being an artist or something definitely started this way back in the beginning of time as the same thing. Someone wanted to create something and some other person was willing to pay for it. The same thing is just happening here, but with a different medium.
Yeah. And I mean, I know it's not the same, but I can always also see it when these people say, why would I get paid for this? These are my friends, or I'm running for my friends. Why should I pay? Why should they pay, or whatever? If you're at the table and your players say, hey, we're going to pay the pizza for you tonight, that's also kind of a form of payment for running the game.
Yeah. If you run the game where it's like, we'll buy the books for you if you can run the game, or it's like, oh, we'll pay for a pizza every week, or you're paying for the game, you just don't realize it.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is like, if I'm playing with my friends and the DM's like, oh, we're gonna do Curse of Strahd because I want to run it, and everyone's like, okay, and we like figure it out and have fun. If I'm like, oh man, I wanted to do Storm King's Thunder, well, if I'm paying, guess what we're doing? Like, you get to ask more, demand more, and be like, I want to play this thing. I have this idea for something I wanted to do, so I want to pay to make sure it gets done. And that's what I provide.
Yeah. And we talked a lot about modules and how they help pro GMs obviously run that many games a week. So I'm going to ask you, which is your favorite module that you've ever run? It doesn't have to be D&D.
Okay.
It can be anything, but what is your personal favorite?
So I'm between a couple. My immediate thought, because I have to break it down a little bit.
No problem.
My immediate thought is Waterdeep Dragon Heist. Like I said, I've run it 8 times. I love it. I know it front to back. I've heard complaints about it, and there's things that I could nitpick and say like, oh, well, I wish they would have done. That's what my job is for, is to figure out the little details and fill in the blanks. But I think as an introductory module, as a fun like urban campaign, as like I can make it be as wacky and ridiculous or as like dark and gritty and serious as I want. I cannot speak enough about how much I love Dragon Heist. Rime of the Frost Maiden, fantastic module. That one is more of a mid-tier one in the sense of level of gameplay. So Dragon Heist is 1 through 5. Rime is like 1 through 10, really 1 through like 12. But the other one, I'd say, if I'm talking high level gameplay, Dungeon of the Mad Mage is unbelievable. And I will say I love so many, Radiant Citadel and Can Keep Mysteries, and like there's several modules. There's very few modules I don't like. Curse of Strahd, that's a controversial one. I've had other DMs who are like, what? I'm like, okay, sorry, I don't like it. I love Strahd. That's my baby right there. I don't like the book Curse of Strahd. But Dungeon of the Mad Mage is, first off, the only one that goes all the way to 20. But also, I love a big giant mega dungeon. So I just can't get enough of that. But whenever I'm asked that question, my answer is always Waterdeep Dragon Heist and then probably Rime and then probably Dungeon of the Mad Mage in that order. But like they all kind of share the number 1 slot, but in that descending order, if that makes sense. Yeah. I know it's a weird way to answer the question.
No, but it's completely fine, right? As with TTRPGs all the time, it depends.
Yes,
as always. And while we talked about D&D modules right now, you said that you also run different games. You run Cyberpunk, Lancer, stuff like that. We all know D&D kind of has a monopoly on the TTRPG world. How much it is marketed, how much it actually dominates. How does that look in the pro GM scene? Is it also as dominant?
It's just as dominant. Every system is hurting for GMs. Like every single system out there, there's a ton of players and not a lot of DMs. And I have people who have come to me and they're like, I want to play Cyberpunk so bad. I can't find a DM. And I'm like, I will gladly run it for you. I just, if we can figure out the schedule, let's do it. And I will say, I love Cyberpunk. It is easily my number 2 system, and I would put it on the same level as D&D. The only difference is D&D just dominates the market so much that it's like I have to run more D&D games because I just wouldn't be able to have enough players if I exclusively did Cyberpunk. And so I tell pro GMs out there, I'm like, your own preferences are gonna have to take a back seat to what the market is gonna offer, and that's just the truth of it. But I find times I'm like, no, I will do these time slots and I exclusively look for World of Darkness games. I have a Vampire the Masquerade game I do every Sunday. I have a Hunter the Reckoning game I do every Monday. Like, I want to do those games. They're different. It's a nice little break for me from D&D, or it's like, oh no, I want to do Cyberpunk these times. But if I have 2 players interested in Cyberpunk and 7 interested in D&D, that's what we're going to do. There's times where the system you want to play is not necessarily what you're going to play because you just, you got to make money. And at the end of the day, like, I love so many different systems, but I also have a mortgage. So that's going to dictate what I have to do.
Yeah, okay. You just talked about your players wanting something and obviously them paying and basically kind of with their money dictating what happens. So walk me through this. You have a new posting somewhere and you have found players. How does the build-up look to the first session with these players that you have selected or that have applied? How does that process look really till you get to playing?
So, and it varies from other pro GMs. Everyone kind of has like their way of doing it. The job is new enough that there's not a standard way yet. But for me, and I find most other pro GMs, once I have, let's say, 4 players, I usually try to have a minimum of 4. Sometimes I have 3, sometimes I have 5 or 6. Once I have like a certain minimum, I run all my games through Discord for the voice, and I do the actual like playing through Roll20. But I will create like a private channel for them. They can start discussing their ideas. We'll schedule the session 0. Session 0 is super vitally important. I know there's a bunch of weird old nerds out there who don't like safety tools and don't like session zeros, and
Fuck
they're
'em.
wrong. They can be
Fuck 'em.
wrong. It's a bad, stupid opinion to not like session zeros and to not like safety tools. But when you're playing with strangers, especially over the internet, you need to have them.
Yeah.
And I will say I have had, well over 100, probably closer to 200 than 100 different players across all of my games in the years I've been running. I've had to kick someone out for being a creep twice. That's it. Most players are pretty cool because we're here to have a good time. And the few times where they're uncool, that gets weeded out in session zero. So it's like, it's vital. So we schedule that. And then session zero, I sit down and I explain what module we're playing. If we haven't decided, then we put it to a vote. I give them a list of options. We put it to a vote. Everyone gets to figure out what they're happy with. Everyone kind of gets some veto powers if they want. And then they start talking characters. And I find once I kind of nudge the players in that direction, they'll be like, oh, well, what if my wizard is from here and like you know them and like we grew up together, or like what if we did, and then they just take over and it becomes very easy, and then we set up the first session, jump right into it. But since I do it on a weekly schedule, it's really easy to just be like, okay, it's Tuesday, we're going to play every Friday, so it's upcoming Friday session zero. Next Friday is the first session, and we go from there. Definitely, like I said, a nice little Discord channel where everyone can talk. They can post their character sheets, be like, oh, here's some art I found online, or I already commissioned someone to make something. That's rare, but it does happen. People can really figure it out, and sometimes they'll chat like between sessions and be like, oh, hey, I really like this, but what if your character did, or like, oh, my artificer's going to make you a cloak of whatever, that kind of then becomes its own little space. And I kind of look at it, it's like, it sounds a little silly, but it's like, oh, look at my babies, like all getting along. This is so nice. So it's, once I have a minimum, like I said, then I can just be like, okay, here's the schedule, let's do it, and go from there.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I think especially that you mentioned session zero, because I need them for every of my games. Since I've known that they existed, I have never run a game or played in a game that didn't have them, or in some way at least made sure that everyone at the table is okay and fine with everything that is happening, because we're here to have fun. And especially if you're paying for that service, that even in my opinion, for me, would even enhance that feeling of I want to really have a good time. And that sets the baseline rules for having a good time. Everyone can get along with each other. Everyone is on the same page. Now we can have fun together.
It makes a huge difference. I've had so many times where even if it's players who we've gone through a campaign, we've finished a module and they're like, okay, we're all level 10 or something, but we decided, you know what, this new module came out, let's do that. And we do that. And I'm like, okay, well, we're going to do session zero because we're going to talk about what that campaign is going to be. We're like, even if I'm like, all right, we know the safety tool stuff, like, let's talk. Does anyone have anything new they want to add? Did anything come up in the previous campaign that you're like, oh, I didn't realize this was a weird thing for me? I had even like a fear that I learned about myself recently. It was like my father did a lot of woodworking coming up, like when I was growing up, and I was like working on my book of spells, and I was like, wow, I have like 9 spells in here that involve like buzzsaw, like, spinning blades. And I was like, I didn't realize what a real fear that was for me. Then I was like, yeah, that is a weird thing. So like I had where I was gonna play in a stream, and they're like, does anyone have anything that they want? And I was like, yeah, this is a weird one, but buzzsaws apparently are a weird trigger for me. I didn't even know I had until like a few months ago. And they're like, okay, cool, off the table. And so like little stuff. I had someone who had eye surgery during a campaign, and then they're like, we did a session zero for the next campaign. They're like, can you not have anything involving anyone's eyes, because that freaked me right the hell out. Like, since I've had my surgery, I'm very sensitive about hearing about something close to anyone's eye. I'm like, okay. So I do the safety tools every time, even if it's the same players. It's vital.
Everyone changes, right?
Yeah.
We just today did the safety tool for a different campaign. My things changed. My answers changed from the last time I did it. And that only was a few months ago. So it happens. And again, to everyone out there, please use, and if you're really listening to this, after a lot of different episodes where we said, fuck you if you don't use safety tools. Fuck you.
It's such a silly, stupid, contrarian position to be like, no, I want that. It's like, no, because I guarantee if you really believe that way, it's like, I guarantee I could think of some shit that would make you uncomfortable. Yeah. And you'd be like, well, I don't like this. It's like, yeah, well, too bad, because you didn't want safety tools. And it's like, everyone deserves to feel happy and safe and have a good time. And for me, especially if they're paying.
Yeah.
If I'm paying, I better have a good goddamn time because it's like, this is money.
It just enhances the game in a way without it couldn't even be possible, because everyone can feel safe and protected while having all the emotions going on that they want to have going on, or the opportunity to have going on, without having to worry about all the different shit that they might be anxious about or don't want in there or make them feel uncomfortable or whatever, because they can just relax and let loose and be the players they want to be, play the way everyone at the table agrees to be played as.
And there's even stuff like, it's like session 0 is so crucial because it's like, we got to know what the hell we're about to get into. If I just started a campaign, like if we're like playing and that's like, oh, you know what, I decided now this is a gritty horror campaign. People like, I'm not here for that at all. I'd never agreed to that. It's like they need to know what to expect. I don't have to give them spoilers, but they need to know some of the things that might come up.
Yeah, and especially what I like to do is doing in-campaign checkups. We talked about this a lot in previous episodes, that during or after certain arcs or after certain specific points, we sit down and talk about, or have basically another session 0, 0.2 or 0.1, whatever you want to call it, to have another checkup to see if everyone's still on the same page with the things that has been going on and stuff like that. Do you do the same thing, or?
I do. When we finish not just like certain arcs, but also like, I have many times where, like I said, I'll do Dragon Heist. They keep going with the same characters, and then we'll do like Storm King's Thunder, or we'll do, like something that's like a higher level module, or like I said, they'll finish a module and then I homebrew the rest of the campaign till they get to level 15 or level 20 or whatever. And so between like big major sections, I'm like, so what are you guys thinking? Like, are you liking this? Are you not liking this? And most of the time they're like, oh yeah, it's, but I had one recently where they're like, we had done Ghost of Saltmarsh and like, oh, I kind of thought this like big like army thing that we were like working together to take down this, not trying to have spoilers, but I kind of thought this big thing would be a big, more climactic battle. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It is kind of anticlimactic in the book. Like, let me think about that. And, it had already kind of passed, but I was like, well, let me see what we can do. And we kind of figured out some little encounters we could run. But it has changed the way I would approach that book for other players now, because I've now had like a group say, and I had a second group who was like, I asked them, we had already done Saltmarsh like a year ago, and they're like, yeah, that was kind of weird. And I was like, okay, so now in the future, I know for this big battle at the end to throw in a bunch of extra encounters that like raise the stakes, because if one group says it, it might be something, but if multiple groups say it, then it's 100% true. So it's going to be a factor of how do I adjust based off of what the players want and how they're feeling over the campaign. If someone's like, we've done a lot of dungeon exploring for quite, can we do something else? Because even if it's not a safety thing, it's more of like, I'm getting sick of these dungeons. I'm like, okay, let's take a step back and do some other stuff. So I check in probably every major story arc, or at the very least, like every couple months to see how everyone's feeling.
And now that you mention it, changing stuff based on, or adjusting stuff based on the feedback that you get regarding that, did you change the way or your jamming style harshly since you started being a pro GM? And if so, what was your strong suit before? What is it now? And how does everything affect the change that is still going on, maybe?
It has changed wildly. And some of the biggest stuff I've learned is you don't need to role play out every single fucking thing that happens. Okay, just if you go into town, you can have them talk with the guards and do this and that, but then like, okay, I need to buy some armor. I'm like, okay, here's the prices, what do you want? And they buy the stuff they need, we move on, and we can have fun. But like little certain downtime stuff like that could take sessions if I role play out every little fucking thing. Like, I'm not doing that. And it makes those moments go by a lot smoother because I'm here to have fun and fight dragons and do crazy things and go on heists. Like, negotiating over the price of a shield shouldn't take 20 minutes. It should be like, how much does this cost? 50 gold? Cool, I'll buy it. If at most like, oh, can I get a discount? I'm like, make some general checks, and then that will apply to prices. And this is it. I have a flux set where I have written out a little thing for myself, and I've seen some tools online of like, here's the prices and here's the variance of if they get a discount and this is what it is, and they don't like it, tough. And so that has wildly changed. But also, like, I've added so much more in homebrew, and I've learned so many fun little tricks that have adapted how I run monsters, how I run dungeons. Everything I do is different now from when I started, and I've really gotten to a groove of like, okay, I like this, but I learn new shit all the time. our mutual friends like Abyssal Brews, like I use like their campfire stuff for some travel, and I have other times where I do travel where I'm like, no, and I just run it completely differently. It depends on the group. Every table is different. And, some people want the big, heavy, intense dungeon crawl. Some people want cool, relaxed, almost no combat, just roleplay moments. Both of those are valid, so I have to be able to run any of them whenever the players want. So my style changes, but I still try to I prefer combat that is more intriguing than it is challenging. I'd rather have monsters with cool effects or things that combat is more of a puzzle to be solved than it is like just bags of hit points hitting each other. I like, cool puzzles. I like exploration. I like getting into like big high stakes stories where people learn of the giant web of lies and deceit that the villains have done. I find the things I like, and then I find stuff I'm like, I've been doing this for 6 months and it's not working. Fuck it. And I just drop it and I switch to something else. So I listen to other GMs. I think the best advice I've ever gotten about writing, which applies to how I DM, is you should read stuff you like. So if you go out and you watch Critical Role, or you watch Dimension 20, or you watch, if you listen to Reckless Attack, if you listen to stuff you're like, oh, I really like this, is great, that'll help you and you can build your stuff. But then you start to kind of rip off just the stuff you like. You should also read and pay attention to stuff you don't like, so you can be like, why don't I like this? And then do it better. If I see a DM who makes a stupid ass decision, they're like, I decided I was gonna, I'm like, that sucks, how dare you? And so I change my style so that I don't do that. I'm like, ugh. And it makes me run the game differently, so I know my players don't have that like ugh feeling when they're in my games.
You kind of answered my final question for you, which we have for our guests as of late, which is the most out there GM advice they can give, things that do not normally hear, right? For example, Shelly Mazanoble from Dragon Talk said, have enough snacks. Like, obviously everyone knows have snacks, but just these weird out of the pocket advice that don't normally get told. If you have anything else, but you kind of answered it with the also consume content you don't enjoy and learn from that. So
the only other one I have is don't plan too far ahead. And I know a lot of GMs say that, but I'm begging GMs out there, don't plan too far ahead. Like, you can plan the machinations of what the villains might do. That's fine. If you're like, okay, the party will go to this dungeon and then they'll go here. No, they won't. They will go in opposite of the direction you want them to go. You can't make any assumptions of what the party is going to do, ever. There are times where you can try and force them. I had something where I was like, oh, then there's like this big rock slide and they like fall down this thing and then they're in this big dungeon and they're like, someone's like, I'll do Featherfall. Oh no, I'll throw a grapple out. And they did anything to avoid. And I'm like, guys, look, the dungeon is at the bottom of this. Can we all just fall down, please? And they're like, oh, okay. So you can't make assumptions. Like, you have to plan encounters. But if I plan like a big monster encounter, wherever the party goes, guess where that monster is going to show up. Don't plan around what you think the party will do. Make plans, and then whatever the party does, enact those plans. That is the best lesson I've learned. It's like, oh no, they didn't go to the little mining town I wanted them to go to. Okay, well, wherever town they end up in, guess what? Now there's a mine at that town, and it's like, oh yeah, oh no, all that stuff. So if like I said, I can't anticipate what the party's gonna do. That way they don't feel railroaded. They can make whatever decisions they want, but I still get to have those encounters that I have planned for and have them happen. I've had where it was a big giant seafaring adventure, and I was like, oh, they're gonna have this huge like dragon turtle will do this, and I was like, yeah, and I planned it out. And then someone's like, oh, I have a feature, I can just go here and I'll then I'll use teleportation circle to do that. And I was like, okay. So I just discarded that whole thing. And then 4 months later in a different campaign, they're like, oh, we have to go on this big seafaring journey. And I was like, well, because I already had it written and ready to go. Nice. That is the best advice I can give. That's a little counterintuitive, is like, do not plan too much. Like, have some ideas of what you want to do, but don't assume you'll know what the party is going to do.
And I think with that, we've reached the end of our episode. So the first thing to do is thank you for being here. Thank you for talking to us. Thank you to enlighten us and explaining a bit and answering our questions. Where can people find you and all the shout outs you want to do? Now's the time.
Well, firstly, let me say thank you guys, because when I made my Twitter, 2 years ago, like, because we're in the, like, within the first, I want to say like 25 or 50 people who followed me, somewhere around there. It's like, however long ago I made my Twitter. I remember you guys, and I was like, oh my God, and I was like, would listen, and I'm like such a huge fan. So like being on this has been a big deal for me, and I'm very excited. So I want to throw that in there and say how much I appreciate and how excited I was for this. So yes, I am Azzam. I Ko-fi, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram. I have a Tumblr that I don't do a lot with, but it does exist. But it's Alec_Azzam or Alec Azzam. It's pretty easy to find. Right now, my biggest projects on my Ko-fi, I have a book of 100 subclasses for 5e, another book of 100 homebrew spells for 5e, and a book of 100 ancestries, lineages, player races, whatever you want to call it, for 5e. And I'm currently working on, and before the end of the year, we'll release a book of 100 magic items for 5e. So if you like D&D 5e, you're like, what if there were 400 more motherfucking options for this? then check out my Ko-fi, because it'll be there. And I also, I've had plenty of other things I'm writing. I'm working on with some pretty cool people, actually, some homebrew modules that will come out next year, and some other projects, if you like homebrew and you want stuff from someone who has run, at this point, I think I'm somewhere around 6,000 hours of sessions in the past couple of years. I have all of that. But the biggest shout out I want to make, well, firstly, I have Redemption VA, who is absolutely fantastic creator. I was on their Cyberpunk Red show, and I love all of their stuff. I want to shout out The Last Omnitect, who is making his own system called Legacy that he's been working on for many, many years and is a brilliant, brilliant creator. I want to shout out Game Goddess Alex on Twitter, who's Ali from Dice Drop, who is absolutely fantastic. They made my amazing new branding suite, my logos and stuff, and they're just a hilarious person. But I would be remiss if I did not shout out the most important person in my entire life, who is, beyond just being the most important person in my life, like, they do so much to help me. They're an incredible, amazing woman. But my lovely wife, Ina Coffin on Twitter, INA_KOFFEN. She is an artist who does incredible illustrations, but she's also a hilarious person. And I will say, that's one piece of advice I'd love to give pro GMs in the space out there is, have an awesome partner with you who will support you. And when you're like, oh, I can't fucking do it anymore, that they be like, no, it'll be who can support, but unfortunately I can't be like, oh, just go find a partner. But I can't speak enough about how much I appreciate all the stuff that my wife does, and how much she's made art for me and done incredible stuff. And having friends, whether it's your romantic partner or just friends or family or some people you can rely on when you are oh God, I'm running 15 games, my brain is on fire right now. Having people you can rely on, or people I can go and be like, I gotta tell somebody about this twist in the campaign that I can't tell the players, that makes a big difference too. So infinite shout out to my lovely wife, Ina Coffin.
As per usual, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at DoubleDMPod, or you can visit our website at www.doubledm.com. We also have a Ko-fi if you would like to check that out. And please, if you like the show, leave us a rating on your favorite podcasting listening platform of your choice. It really helps the show out, gets us out there. Tell everyone that you want to share this with. Tell your cat, tell your grandma, tell your wife, tell whoever you want to do. And yeah, with that, thank you all for listening. Thank you, Alec, for being here. Hear you on the next one, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.